So people often say, Scott, at 70 years old, you are the hardest working man we know, but I got to tell you, I'm not. The fellow I'm going to introduce you to works even more than I do. I don't know how he does it, but he's extraordinary. And of course, I'm talking about Kurt Johnson, the maestro of Light and Light Publications. He's got so many books and the news magazine and all that he's putting together for the evolutionary leaders and the Sign Network, Community Earth, and media collaborations. He's amazing. And Kurt, I'm really excited to meet your friends tonight and to learn more about what you're up to with Light on Light Publications.
Yeah, Scott, thank you so much. And I think all of us came on right kind of at the last minute because we've been coming off frantic, busy times. I think that's kind of the same for everybody. So it's a time for us to relax together and connect together and really share the best of ourselves. So it's great to be on again with authors from Light on Light, and particularly from the two volumes that trace the entire history of interspirituality, which, like we said in our last chat about it, is the universal spirituality that already resides in all the world's religions. And it is that drop that Omashar was talking about that is the biggest and the smallest, and the up and the down, and what's above is below, and we are it. So when Scott, as you remember, last time I was on with Diane Burke, who's the founder of New York's Interfaith Seminary, and with Patrick Carolyn from the Franciscan Action Network. And we had a fantastic chat about, personal spiritual development and transformative change. And that's what we're going to be following up with tonight. Because when Scott asked me about who might be great to bring on, I told him about my new friends and old friends, Rory McEntee and Alejandra Warden, who also goes by the fond name of Alex. And what I told him was, when he said, send me a short text, I said, well, both are featured authors in the recent interspiritual volumes, and both join profound spiritual backgrounds with sacred and social activism. And that's so relevant, of course, to the weekend that we're celebrating now, and also to what's going on all around us in the world right now. It's crazy. So Alex, an Argentine American, is especially noted for her work on the divine feminine. Her part in the interspiritual volumes was writing on the divine feminine and the relationship of all the spiritual traditions. And Rory, who has his doctorate in Theological and Philosophical Studies in Religion as well, and was an old friend of Brother Wayne Teasdale, who named the interspiritual paradigm. And of course, with Father Thomas Keating, who hosted the Snowmass Dialogues for over 30 years, from which comes the 9 points of agreement among the world's religions. And then from that, Wayne Teasdale's 9 elements of a universal spirituality. And we dipped into a lot of that last time. And I told Scott that both Alex and Rory are noted authors and trend leaders in what is happening today, both with spirituality and with multicultural transformative change, which is so relevant then to what we're celebrating this weekend. So if everybody can bear with me just for another minute, I want to give you some more quick specifics about each of Alejandra and Rory. So Rory has his doctorate, as I said. He also has an MA in mathematics from Southern Cal, and that might ring a bell in your football world. He's the author of The Sacred Secular Binary, Challenging the Divide in University Culture and Democratic Societies, and a really, really pioneer book a number of years ago on the new monasticism and Interspiritual Manifesto for Contemplative Living, all about community, which I know is so important to everything that the Peace Tribe is about. And Rory has taught philosophy, math, world religions, mathematics, both at the college level and at the secondary level. And he was also a vice principal in secondary education. And he's the director and founder of the Charis Foundation for New Monasticism and Interspirituality, which really took over the Snowmass Dialogues when Father Keating transitioned. So there's so much to share from the rich past of Charis and everything that Charis is doing now. So Alejandra is a contemplative educator, spiritual teacher, and author dedicated to cultivating a deep consciousness of oneness and the relationship, particularly to the divine feminine. I know, Anasuya, you're going to just vibe with that all over the place. So, rooted in the wisdom of the sacred feminine from Sufism, her teachings also integrate her Catholic upbringing in Argentina and offer a natural and embodied interspiritual approach transformation. So when I saw you all dancing, there it was. That's about as embodied as you can get. So she specializes in meditative and contemplative practices, as well as the interpretation of dreams and spiritual experiences. And she serves as an inner spiritual mentor, not only for the Spiritual Paths Institute, which I think many of you know was founded by Father Keating, and from which comes contemplative outreach and all of these other things that are huge today. This was back in the pioneer days. And she's also then a part of the Charis Foundation that Rory is a part of. And she's the author of Remembrance, a Vision of the Sacred Feminine and the Renewal of the Earth. So thanks for being patient while I shared those details. So welcome, Rory. Rory and I go back about 25 years. It's great to see you. And Alejandra, I've known you for a long time by reputation. I think it's the first time we've met. So that's really a thrill. So where I want to start is actually asking you to tell everybody here so I can shut up and let you guys talk, but to tell us about what each of you bring to the table, both in the sense of what you're doing now, books that you've written, organizations and events and things that you've been a key part of, and what brings you to being able to share with us tonight, both about the journey of personal transformation and the challenge of the collective transformational change that our world just has to get by if we're going to survive, let alone thrive. And all we have to do is turn on our TV to know how tricky that is. So let's go ahead and start with Alex. Alex, tell us about yourself and what you're excited to have this community know about what you're bringing.
Well, as you said, I was born in Argentina. I lived there for many years. I started my work really trying to create beloved community. In Argentina, I've been an educator, a Montessori and Waldorf educator and trainer. And I actually created one of the first Montessori-inspired schools in my country. So what I developed there was education for peace, and it was an ecologically oriented school. And that was really important for me because this happened. It started really when I was 23, in a situation in which my country was going through some military issues, and people were disappearing. Education was really difficult. As a matter of fact, I wanted to study physics and I couldn't because university at the time was closed. So was anthropology or many of the humanitarian sciences. So basically, I end up in education, and I found that it was super important to create something for a new generation. Because for me, what I noticed was that there was a new awakening consciousness, and it was really brought by children. I could feel that they were very different and they needed something that was not available at the time with traditional education. So I found Montessori, and I found some of Waldorf's actually was trained by a woman, Frances Wolf, who was a direct disciple of Maria Montessori, a British woman. And she was the one that actually mentored me into trying to bring these two forms of non-traditional education together. But then I got married, I got twins, and then I came to America and I got involved with Sufism. I had a series of mystical experiences that I was unable fully to understand or put words into. And at that point, I met a Sufi teacher who is a master in interpretation of dreams and spiritual experiences, and I studied with him for over 20 years. I also represented his work in Latin America for about 10. But my call was always interspiritual. So when I met Rory in the first interspiritual gathering, that was, I think, uh, the morning, it was the dawn of interspirituality. I was super impressed because he was bringing something that I felt in my heart all my life, but I didn't have a name for. So after that, really started my journey, not with Rory himself in the beginning, but starting to study more the work of Father Thomas Keating, of Wayne Teasdale, and I found basically slowly a new home. And then when Rory invited me to work, and his also intent, he's going to talk about it more, but he's also his intent to build beloved community in a way that people truly understand what it actually means to work together, in terms of function, not of roles, and in terms of coming together as a community that is based on respect and understanding and sharing values. Um, it's actually food for my soul in a certain way. That's how I feel my work today.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And it's such a great invitation then for Rory to talk about, because Rory and I, like I said, we go back 25 years. And I don't say that lightly. That means Rory was a lot younger. I was a lot younger, but we were both close friends of Wayne Teasdale's, and then fell into everything that Father Keating was building from the Snowmass dialogues, which, of course, as I said, what came from the 9 points of agreement among the world's religions, and then Wayne's 9 elements of a universal spirituality. So back when I first knew Rory, he's one of those people that when you meet him, you know that he's on a journey toward greatness. And I mean that in the most humble way, but I mean it in what greatness really means, in serving and in setting the example and teaching and building things, building those structures that Wayne Teasdale talked about to bring the dreams that you talked about, Alex, into reality, into the real world that we live in, which is so challenged by relationships, as you just said. And that's really the whole meaning of this weekend, and the message of Martin Luther King is all about how we get there as a global collective, about love and sharing, mutuality, all of those values of spirituality. So Rory, tell us about yourself and the journey that you've been on. And it's so great to have you here.
Sure. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you for the very generous introduction. Not sure it's totally deserved, but I appreciate it. Yeah, so, I as I first heard about the spiritual journey, kind of coincided with meeting Brother Wayne. So, coming out of college, I got to know Brother Wayne at the 1999 Parliament of World's Religions, and then became one of his closest students the last 5 years of his life. He even spent a couple Christmases out with my family during that time. And Brother Wayne, of course, coined the word interspiritual, and so from the beginning of my journey, I kind of had intersecting streams from Brother Wayne, who was a Catholic priest, and inherited Father Thomas Keating, who was Wayne's spiritual father, as a teacher. I also had a Hindu Advaitic teacher, Joshi Baba, and I accompanied Wayne on his last visit to see the Dalai Lama in India, in Dharamsala, India, who Wayne also considered a close teacher, and they had a very close relationship. And so ever since that meeting, I've always felt the Dalai Lama as a presence and teacher for me as well. And Tibetan Buddhism has been a big strand. And as Kurt mentioned, I ended up working with Father Thomas Keating on the Snowmass Dialogue Interspiritual Conference, which started in 1984. And brought together spiritual teachers or advanced practitioners from different religious traditions in a retreat-like setting for like 5 days, usually at his monastery, St. Benedict's. And so I came in 2010. It had already been a long project. I was the administrator for the final 5 years. And when that ended in 2015, we founded an organization, the Charis Foundation for New Monasticism and Interspirituality, that started out continuing those dialogues, the Snowmass dialogues. And we've held, I think, 10 of them so far, and now do quite a bit of other work in the world. But the heart of, at least our organization, Charis, really came out of this deep dialogue among advanced practitioners and spiritual teachers from different traditions. And back then, it was very common where people wanted you to be, sort of choose a tradition. So you can learn about different ones, and then you pick this one, and that's your tradition, and you kind of stay in those boundaries. But since that time, I mean, we've seen how the word interspiritual has grown. We see how younger generations increasingly are not following traditional models of the spiritual path. And we also see how important the traditions are with their wisdom and the techniques that they've developed, as well as some of the shortcomings, particularly a lot of patriarchal structures. And so we spent a lot of work in deep dialogue with teachers, and at Charis, I think we've really come to lean into trying to develop structures and communities that allow people to walk their own spiritual path, whether it's in a tradition, whether it's among traditions, or whether it's outside of traditions, with similar types of support and guidance from teachers and a spiritual community to help them on that path, but without losing the depth that is there in the traditions, and ways that will take us all the way to the deeper structures of reality and the deeper parts of the journey, where we have to face the dark side of our personality, and we have to struggle in our work in the world to unite it all and to bring it all together. And so a couple years ago, we got a retreat center down in New Mexico, a very, very beautiful retreat center, Charis Mandala. And we hold retreats here now. We hold our dialogues here. We train people to hold Charis circles in the world, which are kind of weekly meditation prayer groups, along with a communal spiritual reading practice. And what we've found in particular is our work has been reaching out a lot to younger people, so that we get a good intergenerational mix of people who are older, people who are my age, and then a good contingent of younger folks that really resonate with their yearnings for the spiritual journey and their yearnings for those paths to be individuated to some degree, but to also contain solid teachings that challenge them and force them to go deeper and connect in the deepest way, really partner with our religious traditions. And Alejandra and myself and Nathaniel Miles Yepes serve as teachers for that spiritual community. And Nathaniel is also an equal part of Charis, and he's the head of the Wisdom Traditions Department at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. And we also have a Keating Schachter Center for Interspirituality there on campus that brings in wisdom teachers and helps them have access to students as well as faculty and staff there, runs other programs like Charis Circles, and is named after Thomas Keating and Nathaniel's teacher, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, one of the great Jewish spiritual teachers of the 20th century. So I think that's some good stuff on Charis. Maybe the other thing I'd just mention is my most recent book that Kurt mentioned, The Sacred Secular Binary, came out a couple months ago, and given this is Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, perhaps is worth mentioning. The book contains some fairly lengthy passages on Martin Luther King Jr., as well as James Baldwin and Malcolm X and others, as well as a full chapter on Howard Thurman, and moves towards what I call a beloved community of religious diversity, and is really looking at the role of a sacred secular divide in our culture, and looking at it particularly in the sense of living in a democracy, a religiously pluralistic democracy, and recognizing that binary has really grown out of a history of our struggles with Christian authority structures and Christendom, and maybe did good and how it grew. But if we look at where we are today, in a very multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial, and very religiously pluralistic culture, where a lot of people's spirituality and religion doesn't even look like traditional structures necessarily, What kind of binary makes sense today? Where is this sacred secular divide, especially in university culture? And so I really challenge the way it's been used, and looking a lot, even from a democratic and a decolonial angle, and a lot through the voices and lenses of Black Americans, as well as Gloria Anzaldúa. What does it mean to move forward to create a truly multiracial democracy? One that only exists in our hearts and our imaginations in many ways. And how can this be born without some sense of the sacred, at least for most people in our country? And so what would this mean in our educational systems and our political structures, and the way we engage as civic beings and as part of a community that's not always of our choosing? We don't get to choose the people we live together with in this country, but that doesn't mean we can't love them. And we have to learn to get together with them, whether we agree or not. And so I think these are some of the deep messages that grow out of some of the great democratic saints who were also contemplative sages. Howard Thurman, Martin Luther King Jr., and others who we can turn to for guidance for where we're at today, especially in their commitment and struggle and sacrifice for the spiritual life, and wherever that would take them, and willing to follow that. So that's probably enough for me, and I can turn it back to you, Kurt, and see where we want to go from here.
Right, that's really great. And just as a heads up to Omashar, in about 10 minutes, when we're 40 past the hour, I'm going to pass it back to you for a little interlude before Rory and Alex and I continue. But what's so amazing about where this conversation has gone is that a lot of you know I do so much work with Rion Eisler, who's 94 years old, and the author of The Chalice and the Blade. So this whole thing about the binary of domination versus partnership, and how we get from domination consciousness and domination culture, which now in politics and economics and everything is ruled by that. It was stark in the Martin Luther King days with the hoses and the dogs, and just crazy. And it's almost equally crazy today how we get to that love-based culture that you're talking about, is this transition from domination to partnership. So I wanted to go to Alex and say, Alex, this amazing work that you've done with the divine feminine. The feminine voice is the welcoming voice, it's the embracing voice, it's the yes as opposed to the separation voice. And so tell us more about what that brings to not only our lives individually and our personal lives, but where the world has to go in this transformative change, in that sense of the welcoming and the embracing. So tell us about that.
Thank you, Kurt. Yes, I think that the feminine at this point, in both men, women, it's not just for women. It's an important voice of love, communion, and togetherness, because the feminine understands naturally what is unity, what things are related, how things come together. And it's a force, really, the feminine, in the sense of creation. When we look at creation, everything is integrated, everything is interconnected. It's our part of the sense of separation that does not allow us to see that. And I think that is one of the main shifts in consciousness that are happening right now, in which people are starting to understand the communion, the sense of togetherness, the sense of interrelatedness that actually is happening. But at the same time, what Rory said, for example, about we need a certain spiritual retraining in a certain way, because this knowing of oneness is what the old sages always knew, but it's not what we still know. So we still come with some parameters that are from the old days, trying to bring together this new kind of community. So on one level, we have the tools, because the feminine is here. It's a new form of consciousness that is here for everyone to take advantage and to integrate. But at the same time, we continue having a consciousness of separation in some ways that becomes a little bit of an impediment. And one of those is what is happening right now. in which you have these two kinds of consciousness. So one that I call most evolutionary in the sense that is with the times, when things are coming together, reunited, connected, where love and understanding and trying to help one another, it's growing. We're able to do these communities. And there is this other force of this other consciousness that tries to impose separation and differentiation and distance from one another again. So one of the good things is that by using our sense of integration and interconnectedness, we can actually start bringing this world into reality, which is simply to see what it is. The earth is paradise. The world is a heaven on earth. So it's just that we don't see it when we feel separate. But at the same time, what happens is that the feminine has been damaged in a certain way for many thousands of years. So there is also some anger in that. So we cannot respond in the same way of these energies that are trying to separate us by creating more anger. I think Martin Luther King, talking about this weekend about him, he says darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And this talks about what is happening right now to me when these forces of love and integration are coming together. We cannot put ourselves with the same anger and desperation and grief that we feel, because otherwise we're feeding the same energy that is trying to separate us, that is trying to create this distance. So I think that the feminine right now in all of us can nurture our hearts, can hold the grief, can hold us like a mother, like a father, like a caretaker, really embrace, because we are all suffering. Many people are angry, many people are in deep grief, and start allowing us to see what we have in common rather than when we have indifference, and allowing for this to grow in our hearts, even with the thorns that sometimes we encounter. That's what I feel at this time. The consciousness of the feminine can actually help heal the world.
Wow, that I just yeah. Now you got me speechless. So yeah, how we get to that world. I know Rihanna, I have to admire her so much. She's 94. She's a Holocaust survivor, and she's still tirelessly working, as you said, for this work that this world that we know exists in our heart, could build the paradise you're talking about, manifest the paradise that we feel when we're in oneness with nature, when we're seeing the beauty of what's around us, and not being impeded by the craziness what humanity tends to do over and over. So what I'm going to do now actually is I'm going to send it back to Omashar just to give us a short interlude, because when we come back, we'll go back to Rory and Alex and close out this first hour by talking more about the future and taking the visions that both of them have brought to us from the work that they do and we all do, and project that into that prophetic voice that Wayne Teasdale talked about that could bring about that world. So Scott, if you want to say a few things before we tap it back to
Yeah, I
Omashar?
just want to make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about here, and knows about Light on Light. I put it in the chat box, but this is the amazing organization that Kurt shepherds, and you can find it at lightonlight.us, or I like to think of it as lightonlight.us. And right down below, here are the two books that we've been referencing a few weeks ago and again tonight. Interspirituality, Volume 1, The Heritage, Volume 2, The Future. You can get it here, or you can also get it on Amazon. If you are Amazon buyers, just go to Amazon, put in Interspirituality, and it pops right up. Here's the first book, The Heritage. I've got both of these books. In fact, I'll pull them out and show them to you with pride. I really encourage everybody to get these books. They are extraordinary anthologies with some of the most inspirational authors of our time. And you've done an amazing job of putting this together. And that's why we're dedicating two shows to this incredible work. And with that, now I will happily turn it over to my co-pilot, a good friend, Mr. Omashar.
Absolutely. Omashar, over to you.
Let's send our love and our appreciation. And Iota writes, I'm going to read some comments from the chat box. Iota writes, our love is like a river from which the world has come to drink. Such powerful, poignant lyrics is what Ayada is sharing. And while we're on some of the comments, because we rolled right into Kurt and Alex, Alejandra and Rory. And there's some comments I want to read because I'd like to include our audience. Ayada writes, Rianne Eisler is truly one of my greatest sheroes. I saw her speak in person about 20 years ago and felt she was truly one of the most important voices of the planet. And KDA writes, I could not agree more. Reverend Jeffrey writes, I happen to believe that we are not one in or with God, but one of God. Now, there's a big difference. If we were one in God, there would be something in a totality that is unlike the totality. If there was something with a totality, there would be a separation between the totality, which we shall call the truth. And that's from Ernest Holmes. And we're going to be celebrating Ernest Holmes' birthday and Reverend Jeffrey's birthday next Wednesday night, January 21st. George Noble writes, interspiritual is a word that never occurred to me, and yet it describes my own journey quite well now. I do attend Sufi gatherings here, and Qigong has become most important to me, and yoga as well. Just as Jeffrey said, enjoying the flow of my own life force, the pleasure of singing, dancing, and singing gospel. So thank you for that, George. Diara is very excited about this conversation. Of course she is. She teaches interspirituality in the schools. She writes, this is fabulous, Kurt. Thank you so much. May the love melt away the trauma. Connie writes, it's a frequency thing. In the lower frequency that was dominant on Earth for millennia, the energy of separation, fear, and scarcity led to the behaviors and systems that are collapsing now as the Earth shifts frequencies, and we see, feel, and know that we are one in an abundant universe, and with trust, we create new behaviors and systems and realities. Onward to peace on Earth. So thank you, everybody, for some of those comments. And now I will turn it back over to Kurt.
Yeah, wow, thank you so much. Yeah, wow. Yeah, so it's interesting, and just returning to the volumes for a moment before I go back to Rory and Alex, in the decision to spend 4.5 years pulling these two volumes together was really about asking the question whether retelling this story, which so many of us, as Rory talk about, were a part of birthing with the naming of that paradigm 25 years ago. You know, Matthew Fox called it deep ecumenism, and that's a good term, because I think what we saw maybe 10 years after the naming of interspirituality was the habit of everyone going back to their silos. And so people, to a great degree, went back to their silos. And as we decided to put these books together on the 25th anniversary of that naming, we really wanted to ask, if we retold that story substantially and in detail and with great authors and great pioneers, could we gin that up? Could we revive that energy to whatever direction humanity might take it? So there was a lot of listening involved in that process. So what I want to do now, I want to be joined again by Alex and Rory, and put on that hat, which was actually the 9th element of Wayne Teasdale's universal spirituality, and that was prophetic voice, which he said is exercising the prophetic voice toward the world of the heart and transformative change and making that real. I'll make one other quick comment. While I was listening to Omashar, I was remembering that back in 1976, that's 50 years ago, I chaired a conference with C.T. Vivian, who you know was a part of Martin's inner circle. And when in the movie Selma, in the kitchen scene, he's the little guy with the hat on in the kitchen scene. And the thing they used to say about CT was he was always the person that the police hit first because he was very small and they knew that they could dominate him. So he was always the one that was getting slugged first. But what that reminded me of is that's 50 years ago that we did that conference at Fordham University Lincoln Center on the relationship of churches and social activism. So this has been a long haul, and it's going to continue to be a long haul. So Alex and Rory, tell us each, start with Rory, when you think of prophetic voice and how to project and reach that world we're talking about, what do you want to share with everyone who's here?
Well, I mean, what comes up for me first is for it to be a prophetic voice, it has to first be prophetic, which means it has to come from a very deep place inside, um, and from a side that is not just seeing right and wrong. There are things that have to be resisted, things that have to be named, but I think the power of the prophetic voice and the power of social change. Is that it stems from a deeper place within us, a place where we really are connected to each other, um, and does not wash over the indignities and the difficulties and sometimes the horror of what we do as a human race. But if we act in a way that is not connected to that deep source, um, we diminish the humanity of those we may be standing against. And in doing that, we repeat the same patterns over. And so, true prophetic voice also has to be transformative, not only for society, but for ourselves. Um, I think this is part of the great message of Martin Luther King Jr. It's certainly the message of Howard Thurman. And I think it's one reason that they were successful, at least to some degree. Of course, not accomplishing in any way everything that's hoped for. But there was a power that continues to reside in our hearts because of the place where it came from. And so learning how to find that place in ourselves, learning how to commit ourselves to a journey that is not always easy, and though it's filled with love and compassion and wisdom, the road there is usually one of suffering often. And that we're able to embrace that suffering in our life, that we're able to use it for good, that we're able to really work hard on not being overcome by negative emotions, by depression, by anger at what we see in the world, and instead use that as grist for the mill. Use that to find a place of dignity. When I think of Martin Luther King Jr., it's the dignity from which he worked from. And we can turn to that and resonate with it and learn what that feels like in ourselves, and then try to only act from that place. I think that's what makes a voice truly prophetic. And it's not usually the easy road to take. It means allowing us to see the horror, allowing the negative emotions to arise, but then working with them so that when we act with a transformed energy of love and compassion and power and dignity that calls others to their deeper place, or at least for those who have ears to hear. And that we can be okay with our little part in the larger picture and without everything having to be a big splash. That's the dignity of our own lives in whatever way they manifest. So those would be some of mine. I'd love to hand it off to Alejandra now.
Yeah, Alex, come on and join us with your voice on this.
Well, I agree with everything Rory has said, of course. And I think he's speaking to me in my heart to a certain maturity, spiritual maturity, because to have a prophetic voice, a lot of people claim to have prophetic voices. And we have to be very cautious. As he said, it's an ethical, it's a moral development, and that means ego work, as Rory was saying. It means learning to surrender to what is higher and deeper, and it means to learn to see from a place of wholeness, rather a place of what is wrong, but rather what is more perfect or perfectible. And also for me, that includes to offer an experience of what it means to live in this new way. And on that level, just not to repeat what Rory said, I wanted to share that, for example, we try to do that in our work. For example, when we lead retreats, we are three teachers rather than one voice, which means we are trying to somehow model what it means to have a relationship of equals, in which each person brings their own particular gift of the divine, because each one of us have particular qualities to offer to the world and to ourselves and for our journey, but also how we can actually weave that together. That we do the same, for example, in our circles. We try to bring an understanding of what interspirituality really means. It's not just learning to respect that somebody else has a different opinion. It's more how to feel the other and how to feel the beliefs of the other, the practices of the other, how to really embrace the other truly as an equal and truly as the gift that is to the world. Um, and for me, it's always to look at people, try to see people from a place of what I call the soul, or from a place of wholeness, because we have grown. For example, I work a lot in the area of psychology, and one of the issues is that sometimes we're always looking for the defect, what is wrong, what needs to be fixed. And I think that essentially we have, most people have a very pure essence. If we can call to that core um, nature, I think that we can actually bring the best out of people. So when we have our retreats or our work with the circles, we try to actually allow for the experience of what it means to live in community, what it means to live in an interspiritual community, and what it means to seek for meaning. Because spirituality sometimes is a word that not everyone can understand, but all of us seek meaning. All of us seek something that is more true in ourselves. So we also try to also look at our vocabulary, how we can communicate to others so that we can understand one another. So we try to build bridges, not so we don't come just, this is my religion or this is my belief. I'm trying to find ways of true communication. So for me, prophetic voice, it's also it's a way to experience the truth of what interspirituality means.
Yeah, wow. I'm just saying we're going to be tossing it back to everybody here in about 4 minutes. So I want Rory to have a chance to put a capstone on what Alex just said, and then I'll say a few things. And then there's such a great second part to this program. We can turn it over to them and I'll continue. This has just been so rich, amazing. So Rory.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I want to say thank you to everyone for having us. It's wonderful to be here. Um, I'm just going to kind of pick up on Alejandra's point. I think one thing that's really important to recognize is that, the only types of communities that exist are not necessarily ones where everyone has to believe the same thing or have the same framework for their journey or even all be doing the same practice. I think in the past we've often thought of it that way, but one of the hopes of the interspiritual is that we really do begin to manifest a kind of unity in our diversity, a diversity that can really support each other, knowing that we have unique ways of approaching the world, unique experiences in our life, but we can form community and we can form places of support for these types of communities. And it's so necessary. I'm thinking, Kurt, you'll recognize this. You spent time there, but last Sunday I was at St. Benedict's, our old stomping grounds, except this time it was for the final mass that they will ever have there, because so this is Father Thomas Keating's monastery in Snowmass, Colorado, a powerful sacred land where a number of advanced people quite advanced in the spiritual life spent their lives and times praying and pouring energy into. Kurt and I were there together numerous times. And it sold because there's no more monks. It's left with 3 or 4 older monks, and they had to close it down, and it was bought by a billionaire, the CEO of Palantir Corporation, whose organization is currently finding immigrants for ICE. through data analysis and helping out Mossad in Israel. And this is the closing of the monastery is not a new story. It's going on at many monasteries and places of spiritual retreat in the West. And you can also see hints of it beginning in the East. And so I think there's a recognition that these places serve as like lungs for the human family, right? Or kidneys, really. Processing our negativity, allowing the human family to breathe in a certain degree. And everything has become so tight and so converged right now that we are in great need of these kinds of places of refuge. Refuge from the craziness and the busyness of the world, the psychic strain and the negativity of it, where deep work is going on that is no way separated from the world, but is helping it to breathe and helping there to be some spaciousness in it. And so creating places of refuge in our individual lives, some sort of silent or contemplative practice every day, every week, every month, retreats every year, places where we can hold communities that don't force us all to believe the same thing, but hold us all in the same sacred space and support our journeys. This is sacred activism. This is a form of social activism today. And if we don't continue to build some of these vents in our personal and communal lives, the societal strain might just burst. And so the work that spiritual life and contemplative life, it's desperate work that the world desperately needs. And it doesn't always happen in big ways that are seen, but it's felt. And all of this builds up and is a huge part of creating the foundation of a new world that hopefully can grow with all the work that we are all doing. So that's some of the work we're trying to do here at Charis as well, is just provide some of that space of refuge in our lives.
That's great. So let's do this. Let's bring Alex back on so the three of us can hand it off back to everyone at the Peace Tribe here together. What I wanted to say, and it really is what makes every day in my life, is that as I was listening to you all and everybody, how much I celebrate the interspiritual pioneers who continue this message, because this is really the only way that humanity is going to make it. And when we were doing the volumes, oh my gosh, 120 of those voices that we were processing. And I realized, that one of the thrills that, Rory, Alex, and so many of us get is we know people who've raised the bar so high in how they live, and they rise to that, they live that way. And knowing those kinds of people and working with them is what keeps all of us going and gives us that hope that that world that we know could be there can actually happen. And as you've said, that really is looking to what is already there in all of us and knowing that that could be brought forward. So Rory and Alex, thanks so much. I mean, this has gone by like a flash, but it's been so rich. And so the three of us, we're going to hand it back now to what's an amazing second part, because I know a lot of the next roll of guests, and they're like everyone else here, they're heroes. So Scott, back to you.
Well, thank you very much for the wonderful work that you're doing. And I was really touched by much of what you shared, and I can see our audience was as well. And it's we are the Global Peace Tribe, and you are out there on the front lines doing it. So thank you both. And I hope you'll both come back onto the show again, so we can go a little bit deeper with you. Yeah.
Sounds great. Rory, great to see you. Alex, great to have this time with you. And on we go.
All right. Thank you. And Kurt,
You too, Kurt.
stick around because we do have the second half of the show is going to be very, very powerful.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you. And thank you, Kurt, as well. Thank you.
Pleasure.